Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family.
Got it.
Okay, so this is Ruzzel Morales. She's a virtual friend because we've never met, but we've had quite a lot of Zoomy type conversations. A couple of them have been recorded. One like this one, where is it? I'll just go, oh, it's hiding somewhere. I'm not sure why. Oh no, there it is. It's just looked weird. So yeah, so sharing the screen, that's Ruzzel and me having a conversation back in 2020. She did, I won't embarrass you, Ruzzel, by you looked totally surprised. You're like, what? So we'll stop the share. But I'll put the link up at the end of this recording. So if you've enjoyed what Ruzzel had to say about global citizenship, you can go and have a listen. So for me, the context for the conversation, Ruzzel, is that I'm looking for people from different parts of the world to give us a perspective on global citizenship. This is for a first-year course. It's called HIS140. And, it's a course that looking at the history of global citizenship, global awareness, consciousness, whatever we want to call that. But it is very much a historical sort of progression across time, looking at different social forms and so on. But, the key thing is this question of global citizenship. What does it mean? How do we experience it, and so on? So what I'm asking you really is to sort of give us some impressions. You've been involved, I should give a little bit of background, youth council or something similar. Can you tell us what was your involvement as a youth leader? Because that was when I first met you, you were just finishing that kind of role. What were you doing there?
Oh yeah. If I remember right, I met you during the time that I was finishing my term, actually, as a national youth parliament here in the Philippines. Yeah. That was the start of the pandemic, I think. That's why all of our conversations been through Zoom also. Yeah.
So you've got that sort of background. You have an activist kind of mind. You've grown through, or you've come out of a life of, quite a difficult life for your family. Your mum and dad were very much cleaners and doing very physical things to nurture your family. And yet you've managed to find a really interesting place in your own world to be sort of, I guess, looking at, well, what next for a start? But, before we even consider that question, what do you think about global citizenship? I mean, at some levels, it's a silly term. To be a citizen is to be a Filipino, or you live in Manila at the moment, so you might have a city allegiance and so on. In Australia, citizenship generally means being an Australian, maybe being a Queenslander or a Victorian or from New South Wales, whatever it might mean. But, there's much more to it. What I'm trying to give in this course is to say there's much more. We can rethink citizenship, that it's a historical concept in some respects, that it's moving. So I'm just going to hand it over to you and say, Ruzzel, what do you think global citizenship means?
I think, since you already mentioned, right, regarding like the conception of citizenship for different countries like Australia, it's usually when we think of citizenship, it's usually limited to one's nation. That's I think when we talk about global citizenship, we're talking about somehow like different from nationalism, right? It means one's identity actually transcends geography or border. So by that definition alone, it's actually, I don't know if you call it like the antecedent or like the other side of nationalism, but I actually would like to believe that when we talk about global citizenship, it calls one person or individual to actually look beyond. So you have to look beyond your geography or border or whatever like physical uh, let's say, land that you were born in. Because since we are transcending also physical boundaries, this also means that global citizenships also ask one to care for humanity in general rather than their own race, their nationality, or family alone. I mean, it's nice to care for one's neighbors, right, or those who
Mhm.
are who belongs to the same country as we do. When we talk about global citizenship, it calls us to also care beyond that, care beyond
Yep.
your family, care beyond those things. And this also means that there is a calling for the global citizens in this case to act according to what will benefit all of humanity, just not just on their own. So this is how I understand global citizenship, right? Being a global citizen means is a calling to look beyond one's own backyard.
Great. I mean, that's really a powerful definition that you're giving us there, and linking it to care and to action. So it's a call, it's an invitation to act, not just at the local level, but you're not denying that the local level is important. Yeah.
Yes.
So if there's a flood, and down the road from you, you will go and help your neighbors, and so on. And that's what human beings would do. One of the things that I've been aware of with citizenship, or the concept of citizenship, is that it can be very anthropocentric. That means very human-centered. Do you see global citizenship as extending beyond that, or is it still a very human thing?
I think when we talk about global citizenship, right, even though let's assume that our conception of global citizenship is still, anthropocentric, it still calls for us to look at our connections beyond like us as just humans, right? It's also understanding that all of the ecosystems, all of our biodiversity, all of that is also connected to who we are as human being. And if we even talk about like philosophy, right, that we are just stewards of all of this creation. And I think when we talk about global citizenship, we should also be inclusive in a way to think that we are part of a bigger whole, a bigger ecosystem, or not only comprising of humans, but also everything that supports life in this vast
Yep.
universe.
That's amazing. Yeah, in a sense, well, I'll let you know that last week I talked to Purush Chaudhary, who's a Pakistani. She's based in Islamabad, and she was talking about the way our identities shift or move. That we have mobile or fluid identities, I think was the term she used. So you can be a Filipino, Manila-based at the moment, Filipino, but that's not all that you are, right? You're
Yeah.
very much located within faith groups. You're a woman, not a man. There are many other aspects to who you are. Global citizenship, as that part of that invitation, would be an invitation to become aware that your identity can also be in a forest, or it can be planetary in nature, or even cosmic. Yeah, is that am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, it's basically as going back to my definition of global citizenship in the buzzword, I think that I keep on mentioning, it's transcendence, right?
Yeah.
It's also situating yourself outside of just the physical limitations or the direct or albeit more obvious connections that
Yeah.
you have, and knowing that that connection also exists somewhere,
Mm.
perhaps in places that you uh, have not been, because there are certain um, geographical limitation which we should actually also like recognize, right? But recognition is not tantamount, or it's not equal to being limited, right? Recognizing means that there's more out there that we're yet to discover in terms of our connection with other beings here in
Mm.
this universe.
Yeah, that's lovely. So recognition Can you speak a little bit more about recognition? Because to me, there are so many kind of things that goes off in my synapses. What are you meaning by that? Because to me, I think it's a very, very powerful idea.
When I'm referring to recognition, for me, it's just like looking at the mirror, right? Knowing that despite like a person, when I see someone, for example, when I see you, just so it's easy for us to relate, right? When I look at you, I can recognize that there are experiences that you had in your own timeline that I can relate also to, and that becomes a connection for us, a connection for conversation, a connection for me to care also about you. And that connection is actually not it's just there between each in this case between each person, where it's just for us to identify also,
Yep.
to see that that person must have that certain person, despite living in other countries, have also experiences that we
Yep.
can share, that we can talk about, that we can learn from, and we can grow from, right? Despite, living in a different timeline, different in a different country, there are just shared values also, and shared experiences, and even shared yearning of experiencing the world, right? That we can recognize among each other.
Yeah.
So when I'm referring to that, yeah, that's what
I think
I'm.
that's a wonderful description, and it's important because one of the things, and this you said a shared yearning, but if we go back to sorry, what you were saying about global citizenship, you said it was an invitation in a sense. It's a provocation too, but we yearn for connection. Human beings are very communal brained. One of the elements of this course is we talk about collective learning. That culture is about sharing collectivities of consciousness, that my individual consciousness and yours, we can connect in the way that you're describing, knowing, of course, that there are age differences, cultural differences, gender differences, and so on, all there. But at the same time, and I'm lucky because we talk quite a bit, we're aware that there are also some quite deep shared connections. That being human means that we can look, and now I'm talking to my guys about history, that we can look not just to individual timelines, but cultural or civilizational timelines, so that we can understand that there are violences of different sort, but there are also opportunities, that there are remarkable occurrences along any timeline where suddenly things can transform. You use the word transcendence. That transcendence can happen just like that. And I think that's really, that's what I take from just my immediate response to what you just said, Ruzzel. Now, of course, I've got to keep my eye on the time. I find that you're a person who thinks deeply and feels deeply. And at the same time, even though all of that means life can be a struggle, that there is also a sense of optimism. Is it that you see in others the best, or how do you understand optimism? And is there an example you can give us, perhaps even from the Philippines, of something that's happening that makes you optimistic, given crazy stuff's happening in politics? I know that Filipino politics is looking a bit strange at the moment, and so on. But so we can get quite obsessed with all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, the antidote to pulling back and saying global citizenship's too hard, let's push it away. The antidote is seeing in other human beings, and perhaps even other processes on the planet, not even human, that give us hope. So, I'd love to hear what you're seeing in that space.
Great. So sorry, let me clarify. There was a lot.
No,
There's a
I've
bit.
thrown a bucket of stuff over you, and I apologize.
It's okay. Let me try to turn this out. So first, is there like an example that I can hold on to in terms of what keeps me hopeful or optimistic? Is
Yeah,
that it?
that's
All
the
right.
core question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you've been updated also with the politics here in the Philippines, and how some of the leaders that have been elected into position have used vitriol and divisiveness to actually promote a certain kind of politics, right? But optimism springs eternal in this case for my end, because I've been with like-minded also individuals. Right now they are my source of hope. Also, if you're gonna ask me regarding hope, I can see that despite all of this, despite everything that's happening to the country, they don't allow it actually to stop them from doing the good thing, despite being the good thing, the hard choice, right?
Mhm.
Because when divisiveness was normalized here in the country, people who would want to show the truth of what happened, but despite the truth being a little bit challenging to absorb sometimes, right? The people that I look up to right now are the people that keeps on just doing the right thing,
Yeah.
just also accepting and learning from the truth of what happened, learning from the mistakes of the past. Aside from that, I think, since you're also teaching history, one of the things that, because sometimes, um I don't want to burden my these friends of mine also to always
Mhm.
be hopeful, because they are human too. I look back at our history as human beings, right? We've seen great ordeal of of the same politics, greed, and things like that, that was also normalized during a time period. And you're seeing a group of small individuals believing that, that there will be light at the end of the tunnel, just doing the good thing. And
Yeah.
and then, yeah, and then eventually in time, um the truth always prevails. Good things come to happen again, and we see sparkles of those um good things happening again, and that
Yeah.
makes me hopeful also that, this part of of our history in the country will not last. And despite it happening right now, there are compassionate, um there are there's kindness, there's compassion, there's all the good stuff happening under the surface.
Yeah.
We just need a little bit more, like, effort to look for them. That's why they say hope is a muscle, right? You have
Yeah.
to
Exactly.
you have
Exactly.
you have to
Yeah.
exercise it all the time. And I'm gonna be honest in saying that sometimes it feels like a game. It's leveling up and looking for what is hopeful, what is something that, that I can also hold on to. But it's there,
Yeah.
I just have to clear my
Yeah.
eyes to
No,
see
that's
it.
true. We're pretty much at the end of our time. But, on the Filipino front, um, there's Senator Caetano, I think, and the work around democratizing Filipino futures and
Yeah.
so on. There are actual people with what I would call skin in the game that are working, Sherman Cruz and people like that, who are putting an amazing amount of effort into challenging what you might call the status quo stuff. Politics is always a bit grubby, a bit dirty. I don't like looking at it too much myself. I'm not interested in politics. I'm more interested in what you're talking about, really, which is transcendence, which is how do we transcend any narrative? How do we find a narrative behind the narrative? Or how do we replace one narrative with another? And, history is a great place to do that in, of course, because the past is a foreign land, but it's also something that we all share. So, you know, to me, I think that what you're describing, it is a game, but it's not a game. One of the great historians of the early 20th century wrote a book called Homo Ludens, which is the Latin for the playful human. Instead of Homo sapiens, it was Homo Ludens, that we're play acting all the time, and that there's a playfulness to culture. And maybe that's something that my students could think about, is the role that, you know, when we have identities, I don't know what you think about this, but to me, it's kind of like we play act. I'm play acting being a professor, you're play acting being, you know, a student activist or whatever it might be. That, and then we take on another role and we play that role. Does that sort of equate roughly with the kind of way that you might see that? You can say no, you're totally wrong. Yeah, I don't mind.
There was a time that I also thought so too, but right now I think I'm not yet. I have to think again regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an honest answer. So anyway, Ruzzel, I want to thank you so much for giving me some time, and my students, of course. I will wind this up. I'll stop the recording. So thank you very much.